Are you big on origin stories? I am if they're done correctly. And I found an article talking about a new movie that'll be coming out soon. Well, probably after the Rey movie and the Mandalorian Grogu movie. It was announced in 2023 at the Star Wars Celebration. And it is the origin story of the Jedi. And it will be called Dawn of the Jedi. I found an article and it says one upcoming Star Wars movie will change how you see Last Jedi. I will tell you how I feel about this after we read this article. Let's go through it. One upcoming Star Wars movie will change how you see Last Jedi. Star Wars upcoming movie Dawn of the Jedi will explore a brand new era of the timeline that will change the way you see The Last Jedi forever. And there's weepy Luke, or should I say Jake Skywalker. The next Star Wars movie, Dawn of the Jedi, will change the way viewers see Star Wars The Last Jedi due to its exploration of the Jedi's earliest history. Now, they did go in The Last Jedi to Ahch-To, where apparently that was the first temple of the Jedi. Dawn of the Jedi will focus on the Prime Jedi, the first of their kind, thus shedding light on the origins and history of the Jedi and the Force. The film will challenge Luke Skywalker's belief that the Jedi are inherently flawed, uncovering thousands of years of Jedi history that predated the events of the prequel trilogy. Star Wars Dawn of the Jedi will reveal the history of the Prime Jedi, reflecting a massive update to the understanding of the Jedi's origin and history and the Force, and thus will reframe the representation of the Jedi depicted in the Star Wars The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi sees a very bitter, pessimistic Luke Skywalker, Jake Skywalker, who has hidden away from the galaxy and believes that the Jedi are inherently flawed and therefore must end. However, his assessment of those failings is limited to his own experiences and his brief exposure to Obi-Wan Kenobi and Master Yoda. What about Ahsoka? Luke bases his perception of the Jedi's failure on what he knows of the prequel trilogy's Jedi Order and his failed attempt to establish a Jedi temple on Ossus after Return of the Jedi. Although fairly accurate in terms of his Jedi temple and the Jedi Order's fall during Palpatine's rise to power, this doesn't take into account the thousands of years of history that predated both the prequel's era's order and his own temple. Dawn of the Jedi may uncover that history and demonstrate that those flaws, rather than inherent in the Jedi, were never meant to be. Dawn of the Jedi will set up the Prime Jedi. There's the bean art that they had in The Last Jedi, the motif or whatever it was on the floor. The first Jedi, also known as the Prime Jedi, will be explored in Dawn of the Jedi, which will be a thrilling new addition. In the Star Wars movies, the earliest depictions of the Jedi Order go only as far back as a prequel-era Jedi Order in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. While that was interesting in its own right because it was working backward from the original Star Wars trilogy and filling in the gaps, it was clear that the prequel Jedi Order was flawed. Now, Dawn of the Jedi has the opportunity to address whether those flaws always existed in the Jedi or if the prequel's order got it wrong. Seemingly, Dawn of the Jedi and the upcoming film Star Wars New Jedi Order, Dawn of the Jedi will reveal what the first Jedi believed. In addition to addressing the various aspects of the Jedi Code reflected in the Skywalker saga, Dawn of the Jedi will seemingly also address the Prime Jedi's perception of the Force. In particular, the movie will uncover how the first Jedi perceived the light and the dark side of the Force. The imagery on Ahch-To in The Last Jedi, however, seems to signal that the answer may be much more nuanced than the perception of the Force seen in the Star Wars film thus far. The definition of balance in the Force has always been a bit confusing, while many Jedi throughout the Skywalker saga explain the importance of balance, particularly given that the entire Chosen One's prophecy goal is bringing that balance, certainly seen as a good thing throughout the franchise, and the fact that dark will always rise to meet light, and vice versa. The Jedi are constantly trying to snuff out the dark. The objective throughout all three trilogies is to defeat the Sith. That doesn't exactly suggest balance. Excitingly, because the Jedi Temple on Ahch-To shows an image that brings dark and light together, Dawn of the Jedi may reveal that the Prime Jedi didn't fear the dark side, but rather used it alongside the light. This would address another major Star Wars gap. The Jedi are theoretically all about letting go of fear and trusting the Force, yet they clearly fear the Sith and the dark side. This may also shake up the notion that the dark side is explicitly evil and the light side is explicitly good, complicating the Force in a compelling way. Could Dawn of the Jedi introduce Ach-2? Ach-2, first depicted briefly at the end of Star Wars Force Awakens, then further explored in Star Wars The Last Jedi and Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, is revealed in the sequels to be the home of the first Jedi Temple and the place in which the Jedi Order was first established. This means that it would make considerable sense to introduce the planet in the Dawn of the Jedi, which will unpack the history of the Prime Jedi. In addition to having an interesting connection to the sequels, this will answer some important questions about Jedi history. In The Last Jedi, Luke Skywalker describes Ach-2 as the most unfindable place in the galaxy. While surely the galaxy has changed in the thousands of years since, this nevertheless raises questions about the differences between the Prime Jedi and the Jedi Order of the sequels. Rather than an isolated planet, the Jedi Temple in the prequel films is on Coruscant, the most populous city, which is in many ways the heart of the galaxy. This gives it a very close proximity to the Senate, signaling a connection between the politicians and the Jedi, which is ultimately part of their downfall. Note: the Jedi Temple on Coruscant is said to have been established about 1,000 years before the prequel Star Wars trilogy, meaning the Jedi have long since been placed in the center of the galaxy. If Ach-2 was similarly unfindable in ancient times, that may mean that the Jedi had a much more remote role in the galaxy. This could prove interesting, as the Jedi depicted throughout the Skywalker saga have a much more service-oriented role, working as peacekeepers for some time, soldiers in the Clone Wars era, and becoming major players in the Rebellion and the Resistance. Particularly given that the Jedi are a religion, Dawn of the Jedi may show the Jedi to be a more pious, secluded institution, perhaps more in tune with the Force than interested in the issues of the galaxy. This is an interesting article. Some of it I agree with, some of it I don't. What are your thoughts? Do you think that them showing the origin story of the Jedi will change your mind about how you like if you didn't like The Last Jedi, that it would change your mind as to how you see the Last Jedi now? I don't. I don't think anything could really ever change my mind about that movie. So you have a motif of this Prime Jedi, the original Jedi, who had half white or the light side and half of the dark side, and he was able to use both of them. What does that remind you of? Maybe a gray Jedi? Everybody's that I've talked to, half of them are like, yeah, that'd be great. Other half are like, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. There's no reason to have a gray Jedi. But if they're able to walk the balance, as they say, bring balance to the Force, which I thought was, you would have the dark side and the light side, and you bring them together, you would have a gray Jedi who is able to use both sides of the Force. They said that Mace Windu was able to use his dark side elements and light side elements. Plo Koon made Electric Judgment, which was a Sith-like lightning. It didn't kill, but it was very Sith-like. Even Luke Skywalker in Legends used Electric Judgment multiple times, but we can't talk about Legends because Disney doesn't like it. We have them using both sides of the Force for balance, gray Jedi. And then the Jedi are always talking about bring balance to the Force. And I had an argument one time where I said, if they were going to bring balance to the Force, that means that they have to leave some of the Sith alive and some of the Jedi alive. Well, somebody said that the Sith are inherently evil and that it corrupts ultimately. But according to the thing on Ach-2 that we're supposed to take as canon, the Prime Jedi was able to harness both dark and light side. So, bring balance to the Force. Let some of the Sith, live. I mean, they use emotions to rule them, but the Jedi shouldn't say stuff like that if they're going to try to bring balance to the Force. And then as for Luke thinking that the Jedi are inherently flawed. It could be that they're flawed because they don't embrace the dark side and the light side together. It could be that they're only like half. If you've ever seen the Dark Crystal, there are the bad people. I think they're called the Skeksis, and I can't remember what the good people are. But then they make the crystal whole, and it creates the people to come together. So you have the dark side and the light side come together. That's what I think of when I think of bringing balance to the Force. Also, it talks about that the Jedi had been on Coruscant for 1,000 years in their temple. Well, according to history and legend, that was actually a Sith temple that they went in and they removed all the Sith and exterminated them from Coruscant, and then they built their temple on top of that. And then the Emperor came later, and he actually made his palace at the Jedi temple. I guess kind of like thumbing his nose to him. Plus, it had all of the undercurrent of the dark side force underneath the temple that he probably used also. They built the Jedi temples to kind of like average out, bring balance to the Force, maybe? One thing I was kind of unsure of in The Last Jedi was when Yoda caught the tree on fire with all the Jedi tomes and books. Do you think maybe he was perceiving that there was more to the light side and bringing balance to the Force than what Luke thought there was, and that's why he tried to destroy the books? Because Daisy Ridley had already like retrieved them, or should I say Rey had saved the books and had them on the ship. It kind of like makes a tangled knot and makes me very confused, I guess, because Yoda was saying that they needed to destroy everything and just start anew, do your own thing. And then Luke is like, no, I want to stick with tradition, even though he thought the Jedi were inherently flawed, and he like tried to run in to save the books. But now Rey's going to be using the books to try to create her Jedi order. So we'll see what happens. It said in the article that the Jedi were depicted throughout the Skywalker saga to have a much more service-oriented role, working as peacekeepers for some time, soldiers in the Clone War era, and becoming major players in the rebellion and the resistance. Now, from what I have seen, when you see Star Wars, you think that Obi-Wan is the only Jedi left, and he passes his knowledge on to Luke. Well, then you find out about Yoda, but then Yoda dies in Return of the Jedi, so it's just Luke. But then you find out that Order 66 happened, and some people were able to escape, and you have Quinlan Vos, and you have Ahsoka, but Ahsoka, she's no Jedi. You have these people. So were they really part of the rebellion and resistance? I know Ahsoka was in Rebels. Luke was, but they basically destroyed the Jedi Order and sent the people who they did not kill into hiding. So you have these people that are in hiding, and they're not really part of the rebellion and resistance. And they didn't really come out until after Return of the Jedi, if at all. So we'll see. I hope they make it make sense. Does that make sense? I hope they make it make sense and give us some understanding of what that motif, that being art was with the light and the dark. Like I said, I think that they should have great Jedi. You know, I'm sure in every scenario, there's always somebody who's going to lean more to the dark and more to the light. And also, there will not be Sith at the very beginning of the Jedi, because the Sith were a faction of the Jedi that decided to make use of the dark side exclusively because they thought that emotions would help them as Jedi, and they were shunned. So something happened between the Prime Jedi, if he is one who, you know, accepts both dark and light. Something happened between that time and the time that the the Jedi had the faction break free and become the Sith. So, and it caused a huge war, like a civil war between the Jedi and the Sith. We'll find out hopefully in the movie. So, Dawn of the Jedi, there's no release date, and it just says it's going to be done by James Mangold, Lucasfilm, Disney, and the franchise of Star Wars. That's about it. Please let it be a good movie. I don't know if I can take it anymore. I'm hoping the Rey movie is going to be an okay movie. I hope Grogu and The Mandalorian will be a good movie. With Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. I have high hopes. I just don't want Dawn of the Jedi to be a dumpster fire. They have so much potential, and I love origin stories when they're done correctly, like I said at the very beginning. If you're enjoying my content, please subscribe and hit the thumbs up button. I would really appreciate it. You don't have to, but it helps my channel. Well, that's it for this video, but I'll be back with more Star Wars and sci-fi content, more Black Series unboxings, more live streams, and more live movie watches. I'll have to do a Star Wars movie watch pretty soon. Well, y'all have a wonderful evening, and remember, the Force will be with you always. Bye.